first up, we'll hear from Erin Clifford, a lawyer, licensed mental health expert, wellness coach, and best-selling author of Wellness Reimagined. She'll share practical ways we can reclaim our well-being and redefine success on our own terms. Erin Clifford, welcome to the Chundria Show. How are you today?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, of course. Now let's dive on in today. Now you've made a bold career pivot
Yes.
from attorney to wellness expert, and you're still an attorney today, right?
I'm still an attorney today, but I don't traditionally practice. I like to help lawyers get healthy.
I love that. So what inspired you to make that shift, and really how has it shaped your personal definition of success?
For sure. One of the things I think is when I first graduated actually from college, I actually taught high school in the Chicago public schools. I was an English teacher, and I noticed a lot that all of my students and their families were really struggling with their, wellness, their mental health. And then when I joined the legal profession, I saw the exact same thing. And it really just inspired me to really want to help people, find a way to, be successful in their careers and all their, professional endeavors, but then also have, all of that success in your personal life, in your health and wellness too. Because I really think of wellness, kind of broadly. It's, it's not just the physical health, it's your mental, your emotional, your spiritual. And so it really just inspires me personally to think about my different life domains when I'm thinking about success and the kind of life I want to live. And, that career is only like one part of it. We want to make sure that we're tapping into these other things too, because I think that's really what brings us the most harmony and the most fulfillment.
Say it again for the people in the back, Erin. We can be so laser focused on our careers and the money and the finances and the goals, but you're right. We do not collectively as a human race spend enough time living in the present and honoring ourselves in that way. I was looking at your book description, and you say you help people take a break from the chaos of daily life to redefine what wellness truly means to them. And I thought that was so special because our wellness journey is so personal to us. So let's talk about Wellness Reimagined. It sounds like you've laid out a holistic roadmap for better living. For someone that's just getting started on their wellness journey, for whatever that looks like, where should they begin?
So I really think the place to begin is really like taking a deep dive and thinking about what are your values? What are your priorities at this point in your life? Because when I was writing this book, I really said, as a kid, I used to love those choose your own adventures. So I really kind of think of this as choose your own wellness adventure. What do you want your life to look like? And so a good place to start is, what are your values? What are your priorities? Because these should really guide you as you're thinking of, the wellness initiatives you want to bring in, but also, what does that wellness mean in your career, in your personal life, with your family, your community? And I really think about it as, whose dream am I really living? I often get asked by young people, and I think this is so powerful, how do I know these are my values and not the values of people I see online? And so I really wanted, when I was writing this, to help people, of all ages, think about, what do they want their wellness to look like in their own lives? Because, there's no one prescriptive program. It's going to look different for all of us.
It sounds like this can be a really eye-opening experience to someone that gets the opportunity to work with you or that gets the opportunity to read your book, to reinvent themselves. And we always think about reinvention as a pathway to success. But I don't think there's enough mention of reinvention for wellness, reinvention for your health, reinvention for your mindset, reinvention for burnout. Like, we don't spend enough time collectively talking about reinvention. You get with people you haven't seen in a long time, and then you do the catch up and like, how have you been? How's the family? How's your job? But like, how are you? How are you doing? How do you feel? How's that job really treating you? And so that's what I appreciate about not only your mantra, not only your passion for wellness and your passion for helping people become better versions of themselves, but I appreciate that you took time out of because you could go on and you could be an attorney and you could work your job and you could go home and eat your dinner, but you chose to pivot in this way, to give back to the world, and there's so many more people out there that have the need than there are, people that are giving. So I just salute you, for caring about the well-being of others.
Thank you so much for saying that. I mean, I really mean this. Like, there's nothing that brings me like more personal like joy than being able to help people, even if it's just little things, just to make their lives a little bit better. I feel very blessed in my life. I've struggled too with some like mental health challenges and things like that. So to be able to be in like a healthy, happy space, if that message I can spread to others, just is means the world to me.
Sure. Now, I imagine being an attorney. I'm not an attorney, so I can imagine being an attorney or any job that's high-powered, fast-paced. You're juggling 1,000 things. All the deadlines feel important. All the priorities are important. And then not only that, you're managing your career life, your personal life, your responsibility, etc. And then, you have people that may be on the edge of burnout, may have seen burnout, may have experienced burnout. What's the first thing you tell someone who feels like they're running on empty?
You know what I tell people? Like, first of all, take a deep breath. And, one of the things that I've always, kind of lean towards is sort of that idea of like the oxygen mask rule. So, when you get on an airplane, right, the flight attendant tells you, put your oxygen mask on first before you assist others. And I just think that is so important in our lives. And sometimes that gets lost in the grind of, I work with a lot of people, they're, busy professionals, and then they also have families, they're driving their kids all over the place. And sometimes we just get lost in all of that. And so really to like take a step back and think about simple ways, right? You can give yourself that oxygen. When it comes to self-care, maybe the initial step isn't to have some huge wellness program, but can you give yourself like 10 minutes a day? Can you build in little pockets of self-care into your day, into your life? And sometimes that might even just be using your boundaries better. And so really it's about like, being aware of what's going on and starting small. And, when it comes to burnout, I think one of the best indicators is, and, I've certainly felt this in my life, when you stop enjoying things you love to do. And if you kind of are at the point where you're feeling like that, maybe you've got a dinner with all your girlfriends one night and you're like, what, I don't even want to go. I'm so tired. That's to me a sign of burnout, and really kind of thinking about, okay, what can I do to give myself that oxygen?
Sure. You raise a great point about being intentional about carving out that time, because everything else can feel so important, and then you're putting yourself last, you're putting your needs last. Even a 10-minute walk, even do not disturb on your phone, even blocking out a portion of the day where that's yours. Like, I have that 2 o'clock, that 2 to 2:15 is mine, and nobody's going to touch it. Nobody's going to schedule me for anything. And so what I love about your approach is how you really are blending the physical, emotional, and mental wellness components together in one single person. Why is it important to you to treat wellness as more of a full picture experience and not just like, because you could have done like a fitness thing or a diet plan or specifically on mental health, but you're really talking about well-rounded wellness here, right?
Yeah, because I just think, we can't, like cut ourselves into parts, right? Think about, if anyone's ever had like a knee injury or a foot injury, right? It impacts like everything that's going on in your body too. And so I think when we don't think about, that big picture, we're kind of missing out on things. And we might even be going down a wellness path that, doesn't actually work for us. I mean, I think about, really strict exercise plan. Maybe you don't have time for that. I see this come up a lot with nutrition. I've, one of my backgrounds with a lot of certifications is in nutrition, and I love working with that with my clients. But depending on what kind of lifestyle you have, what you like, what your family's like, it might make a difference on the way you want to go about your nutrition in life. A perfect example, there was a couple years ago, all the intermittent fasting, right? Or that time restricted eating came out. And, I would have parents that are like, I'm trying to do this. But now I can't have dinner with my kids. And it's like, well, then you're missing out on all that emotional, mental goodness that you get when you spend time with your family and your community. And so I just think it's important to think about there's so many different ways to eat healthy, to exercise healthy, to live healthy. And so what works for you and what's actually going to work for the world that you want to live in your life?
Very true, and I think you're the prime example. I mean, it feels like you single-handedly designed your parachute and then you pivoted from one career to the next, and you made it personal for you. And then not only did you make it personal for you, you put yourself in a position to serve and help others, which I love. I just love that. Even meeting you today, I just love that you did that. And so for some people, it's not as easy to pivot. Sometimes there's fear, there's that doubt, there's that self-sabotage. In your personal experience, was little Erin always this fearless and courageous and willing to take chances in life, love, and career, or was this something that you adopted?
I think it really took time to sort of like build, my confidence where I was really ready to do it. But I definitely think growing up, it kind of laid the foundation. Like I, had two amazing women role models, like my grandma, Betty, who I actually dedicated my book to. She was like way ahead of her time. Like she was a career woman when before like a lot of people were, but she also loved her family and cared about her health and what she looked like and all these, different aspects. And so I really kind of watched her have this harmony. And I was always just so like drawn to like my mom, she like kind of pivoted as my sister and I got older and kind of were in high school, going to college, and then she started her own business. And I always just thought, how cool is that? And they just always made me realize like you can pivot at different points in your life. And so it really did give me that confidence. But I also think, when I'm trying to help people do that, and even for myself, I really just kind of slowly laid a plan out. I think sometimes we get so overwhelmed because we're like, I'm not ready to do this. Like, I'm really afraid. I think when we like kind of talk about it, and slowly kind of figure out what we want. Like I'm working with a client right now that kind of wants to career pivot. When we're taking some time to figure out what does that look like, right? As opposed to just quitting your job and then all of a sudden you've got your bills and all those things you're worried about. But I do think we can make these life shifts if we really want to, when we plan for them and we've got a great group of people around us, that community that can really encourage us when we're having one of those doubts, or feeling like an imposter syndrome kind of thing. We can be like, no, like you've got this.
Just a bit ago, you alluded to scheduling time for yourself, for self-care, scheduling time for joy, and then also taking a look at the things that you used to enjoy that maybe you're you're like overwhelmed by, like, oh god, I really don't feel like doing that because I'm tired, I don't feel like it. But then you also just mentioned a great point now about building and fostering community and to keep you going, and that support system. So it sounds like you had your family, you've had your family to be your big support system, and you're pulling that experience into being a support system for others, right? And so you're not just impacting individuals, you're also, I read that you served on the ABA Mental Health Task Force. That's a part of Chicago Public Schools here. And then you led community initiatives across the city. How has your work in the community influenced your own philosophy on wellness and success?
The more I go in and like work with groups of people, it makes me realize that, wellness is different for everybody. And that the one thing that I think we all really need to have is, we need to have kind of, what's our core plan for ourselves? We've got to have like a community, and a lot of us have different communities, right? We might have our families, you might have your friend group, maybe you've got your church community or, your gym community, like, right? There's all these different types of communities. I think we need to be connected to something. And one thing that I've really realized over the years, and I really strive for this, is that your attitude and like your outlook on life makes such a big difference. I work with different groups of people. Some of them have a lot of different types of challenges, but the people that I feel like kind of are able to work past them and move forward are the people that have a good like outlook on life. Everything is not going to be perfect all the time, but, how can you kind of be, focus a little bit on that gratitude? That's one of my favorite things to do for myself and with clients. And I do personally really do this every day. I think about when I get up in the morning, 5 things I'm grateful for. Sometimes they're simple things, I got up, I had a bad night and I got up in the morning and that's great this morning, all those kind of little things, I surround if you came into my office right now, I have little gratitude triggers everywhere that make me happy. But I think if we can have a positive attitude, it really does help us, with those challenging times. Because I think when people feel more fulfilled and, have a positive outlook, it just makes us all more beautiful.
You know, the message is clear. It's blaring, Erin. It's blaring, you know, that redefining success has to have a component of wellness in it.
Yeah.
You know, it has to have self-care in it, you know, and that's a big takeaway for even for me today.
Yeah.
You know, what's the one idea or mindset shift that you hope every reader walks away with after reading your book, Wellness Reimagined?
You know, that you are worth it. You are worth spending that time taking care of yourself, and it is not about being perfect. It's just about, you know, progress, idea of progress, not perfection, you know, giving yourself grace if you feel like, you know, you got a little off track here or there. But, you know, it's about all those like slow steps moving forward is really how we're going to get to living the life that we want to live.
Amazing. You're amazing. Congratulations on the book. Now, before we wrap things up today, I'd like to have a quick little lightning round of questions, if you don't
Sure.
mind. Okay. First one is one word to describe how you start your day.
Positive.
Love that. Coffee, tea, or green juice?
Green tea.
Ooh, okay. What's one wellness habit that keeps you personally grounded?
Movement. I've got to move even for 10 minutes every day.
What's your favorite way to unwind after a busy work week?
To cook. I love to cook.
Two more. Chicago hot spot that always helps you reset.
Beyond Health Club.
Last one. And the book you recommend to everyone besides your own, of course.
To what? Sorry.
The book that you would recommend to someone beside your own.
The book I would recommend to someone beside my own. You know, I think Atomic Habits. I think that's just such like a great book if somebody's looking to add in a couple wellness things.
Amazing. Erin Clifford, it has been truly a pleasure having you as a special guest on the Chundria Show today. If anyone wants to connect with you to get a copy of this amazing book, if they want to book you, if they want coaching, if they need some tips, what's the best way to stay connected?
Yeah, so I have a website, erincliffordwellness.com. I am also available on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in checking out my book, it's available on Amazon and at all your other major retailers.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Erin.
Thank you.